I don't know if there's that much work to do for us as people who have had pets who have died to know how important it is. I think the work is around the rest of the world, recognizing what an impact the death of a pet can have. There's been a few folks I've worked with over the years who said, my mom died, my dad died, my dog died, and my dog dying has taken me out at the knees in a way that neither of my parents' death did. And that doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, I think it's great to be having more conversations of recognizing the role that a pet can play in your life.
Hi there, grief growers, and welcome back to Grief Grower. I am so honored and grateful to be here with you, as always. If you've been growing alongside me in my work for a while, welcome back. And if you are new to me and my work, hello. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I am a grief coach, 2-time, soon-to-be 3-time author, and the founder of Life After Loss Academy, which is an online course and community that has helped dozens of grieving people stop feeling lost, stuck, broken, and alone, and start building lives they genuinely love from the lives loss forced them to live. This includes not only death-related losses, because we know that death is not the only type of loss, but also losses like divorce and breakup, major diagnosis, and all the other life transitions that change your life. Here on the show, we believe that grief is not something to get over. It is something that we grow with and alongside, and that when we stop treating grief less like a problem to be solved and more like an invitation that we receive to live more deeply, we can create meaningful lives that are rich with the memories that we carry, the struggles that we faced and the hard things we've been through, and the precious awareness of what it means to be right here and right now. Today on the show, I am joined by Jana DeCristofaro of the Dougy Center, and we are talking about pet loss, how pets are so influential in our lives, why social media can be a tool for digitally scrapbooking our beloved pets both before and after their deaths, and how whether or not your pet's loss is gradual or sudden, you can offer them a good death, or a death that is representative of your relationship with them. Here's a little bit more about Jana. Jana DeCristofaro, LCSW, is the Advocacy and Education Manager at the Dougy Center. In that role, she facilitates peer grief support groups, hosts and produces the podcast Grief Out Loud, which you can find me on, and provides grief education trainings. She is also a step-parent, or that lady, to Captain, aka Captain the Fur Pig, who died on December 8th, 2024. At the age of 15. And we're going to be talking about Jana's introduction to, relationship with, and life with Captain as we talk about pet loss on today's episode. Let's get into it. Jana, thank you so much for joining us today on Grief Grower. You are the host of one of the first podcasts I listened to after my mom died in 2013, Grief Out Loud. But also we have become social media friends through the years. And I have had the honor and the validation of watching you grieve a pet over the past little while. And as someone who myself has lost a pet in the last May, it has been really validating to be in your digital presence, like be a part of your digital sphere. So I'd love for, in opening this conversation on pet loss grief, to talk about the bigness of it, why it matters so much, like why we should all care more about the pets we lose. But before we get there, tell us about Captain, your dog, who he was to you in life, who he continues to be, and anything else you'd like to share about him. And then we'll just go from there.
Well, thanks, Shelby, for having me on the show and for inviting me to talk about Captain and pet loss. And I think when you and I first met for an episode of Grief Out Loud way back in the day, I think Gigi was in that interview.
I bet he was.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that he made his way across the desk. And I remember when you posted about when Gigi died last May, and just feeling that like sucker punch to the heart and to the gut of any time hearing about somebody else's animal has died. So I appreciated everything. And I'm so glad I got to like meet him.
I know, in a sense too, of like, hey, I know that guy.
Yeah.
People, lovingly, so lovingly in my Patreon community back when I did that, and then also now in Life After Loss Academy, are like, I'm gonna miss him on our calls because he would just sit between my arms, like on coaching calls, like right next to the mic. His head would be here and the mic would be here. And they'd just be next to each other, or they just get a tail in the corner of the video, just
Yeah.
sort of like flipping up and down. But he was very social. And I miss having him on calls too. But thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Well, and Captain, that you asked about, Cap, he's been memorialized on a few Grief Out Loud episodes too, because he was in my office at the time I was recording and he's snoring because he was an epic snorer. And there's a few episodes where you can hear his snoring in the background. I tried to edit it out, but now I'm kind of glad that the constraints of my editing software didn't allow me to get rid of it completely. So
Yeah.
I think your original question was, why is pet loss so important? Why should we care more about it? And then a question about Captain and who he was. Both very hard questions to answer. I mean, I don't know if there's that much work to do for us as people who have had pets who have died to know how important it is. I think the work is around the rest of the world, recognizing what an impact the death of a pet can have. Although for so many people, they get shocked, I think, by the intensity of grief when a pet has died. There's been a few folks I've worked with over the years who said, my mom died, my dad died, my dog died, and my dog dying has taken me out at the knees in a way that neither of my parents' death did. And that doesn't make any sense to me. And I feel really guilty and confused and conflicted about that. So yeah, I think it's great to be having more conversations of recognizing the primacy. Primacy? Is that a word? That's not a word. The
I think
primary
it's a word.
Is
Yeah.
it the primacy?
We'll make it a word.
that a pet can, the role that a pet can play in your life. I mean, even if you think about the words that people use, I've always used pet, but other people use companion animal or fur baby. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that term in itself sort of recognizes the meaningfulness and the profoundness of that connection that you can have with an animal, that you are fully responsible for their care from the moment they enter your life to the moment they leave your life in their physical form. And I'm not a parent of a human child, but my sense is over time, kids are able to do more things on their own. And eventually maybe they move out or they go forward in their adult life, and you're still connected to them and responsible for them. But they're able to, not all kids, but many kids are able to feed themselves and take themselves to the bathroom and things
Mm-hmm.
that with pets that we are fully responsible for in terms of making healthcare decisions for them with a being who isn't able to communicate in words, and we have to work really hard to try to stay connected to them. So I just think there's an intimacy of knowing a pet and their needs that's really special and unique.
Yeah, I agree. And I was laughing with my wife yesterday because some of our favorite posts on the internet, and we do not have human children either. And I don't want to compare pet children to human children, just kind of like I never want to compare. I never call my books my baby because I'm like, that is not a human child. And I get logically that that's true. But some of my favorite memes or posts online are like people posting pictures of their cats or their dogs or their birds or their hamsters and be like, this is my son. Hello, everyone. This is my son. This is my child. And it makes me giggle because it immediately relays like the humor and the intimacy of knowing a being that's different from you but sharing physical space with them every single day of your life. That's what comes across to me. And yeah, living with Gigi, I think 11, 12 years of my life. He was with me the day I got the news my mom died. He was with me the day I got the news my best friend died. He was with me when my engagement broke up, when I got married to my wife, and when I met her. He was on the Zoom call when I met my wife for the very first time, because of course he jumped up on the desk where I was. And they are so integral in so many parts of our lives. One of my favorite pieces from, it's either What's Your Grief or Modern Loss. I don't remember which grief blog outlet wrote about this, but the title of the article is My Cat's Death Broke My Brain. And it was this person who had gotten a cat around the same time they'd also gotten sober, and so every sobriety milestone was also shared with this cat. And when the cat died, it was like this whole season of my life where I'd become presumably a better and different person, the person I've always wanted to be. The cat shared. And so when the cat's death sort of bookmarked a kind of ending to that, it was, to your point, profound. And I wrote down these words of guilt, confusion, primacy, of just like this cat was in the orbit of all of this. They're literally in the everyday. We build our routines around their tiny little lives, or for horses and larger animals, their big little lives. And they really just are a part of everything. And I love how you've continued to validate that.
I think you also asked me like what was Cap like or who Cap was.
Yes, because I'll tell you, I'm so sad a little bit to know him mostly in death. I think you and I became social media friends sort of later in our relationship and later in his life, and so I saw a few pictures of him in his cute doggy stroller. But most of what I know is what you've shared of him through memory, and so I'd love to know how'd he come to be in your life, and what was belonging to him like.
Well, Captain came into his dad's life, my partner Finn's life, when Cap was too young to go home to another family. He was December 5th, 2009, and Finn thinks he was probably, I mean, it's unconscionable, probably like 6 weeks old. He was so super tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Finn rescued him from a town in central Washington, and the two of them were just instant best buds together all the time. And I met Captain when he was a tiny, tiny puppy. It must have been maybe just a couple months after he came into Finn's life. Finn and his ex-wife, well, his wife at the time, ex-wife now, and a friend of mine showed up at my workplace at Dougy Center and brought Captain, but I wasn't expecting it. They just dropped by, and Finn reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out this, just the tiniest puppy fit in Finn's hand. And they put him down on the ground, and he was running around in my office. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to pee on the carpet. Bring him into the tiled foyer. And so they let him run around in the tiled foyer. And I wasn't really like a dog person back then. So I was like, oh, how cute. See you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
That's nice.
Thanks for stopping by. And then about 3 years later, Finn and I reconnected, and we went camping, and Captain was on that trip, and I went off to pee in the woods as you do when you're camping, and Captain trotted after me, and we were just like, that was it for me. There was no more not being a dog person. I was like, you're the best thing ever, and I'm going to do whatever I can to be a part of your life. So that was when he was 3.5, and he died when he was just over 15 years old. So I got to be a part of his life for about 12 years. And he was a Boston Terrier. He was always, it's funny, he was small, but he was 20 pounds. So he was a pretty like solid little sausage of a guy. And if you know anything about Boston Terriers, they're silly and they snore and they have gas. So he was very notable for all of those things. But he was also kind of an anomaly when it comes to Boston Terriers. My sense of them is they're a little like high energy, a little hyper, and he was really chill. He was a really calm, easy dog. We always just said he was perfect. He could stay home by himself for hours at a time. You could put a plate of food on the floor and he wouldn't touch it. He just wanted you to play tug of war with his toys as much as you could. And then he would just crash out on the couch and sleep for hours at a time. So most of my friends say I haven't actually had a dog. I just had a stuffed animal that was able to like walk and breathe and bark and snore because he was just such a perfect guy. And he was very tolerant of me. Lots of like dress up clothes and lots of photos. And I started his Instagram page, Captain the Fur Pig, back in the day because I started the Instagram page because I like to give animals personalities. So he became kind of a curmudgeon-y old man, even though that's not what he was like. Apparently that's what I'm like if I decide to be a dog's personality. But also I was already thinking when he dies, I want to have this record of his life with us. So
yeah.
It's not surprising given that I've worked in grief for 23 years that I was like, okay, I need to start memorializing him. And this is when he's like 6, but I was like, just in case when he dies. So yeah, that's why I started his Instagram, so I could have a place to, play around a little bit, but also just to have that record of him. So he was a really good guy. He had a lot of health stuff towards the end of his life. And we did a lot of end-of-life caregiving probably in the last year and a half, and especially in the last couple of months. So that's where all the stroller walk pictures come from, because that's what he could do at the end. We just strollered him all over the place. And yeah, I don't know, Shelby, I'm finding it's a really hard question to answer. Like, what was he like? He was, it's just hard to to distill down an entire life with a being into a couple of sentences, but he was just the best. So
Yeah, it reminds me of like people tell me about your mom. I'm like, well, God, turn a diamond any one direction. What facet do you want to know about? Like, what can I tell you about? Same with my best friend. Same with Gigi. I can give you the highlights. But there's so many different things that come out so many different ways. And I actually didn't think we'd be going in this direction, but I want to talk more about memorializing on social media, because I think that's something that so many grieving people don't necessarily give themselves permission to do, because they fear judgment or backlash, or you're just seeking attention, or you need to be over it by now, or whatever the case may be. And I'll tell you, I have a private Instagram. I have the public one, Shelby Forsythia, and then I have a private one. But kind of, again, unbeknownst to me, from, I don't know, I'd say about 6-7 years ago until Gigi's death, anytime he did something funny, or I did my own Whose Line Is It Anyway, like rewrite improv songs of Mamma Mia when I would feed him. And he would meow in the gaps between words. And so I would record feeding times like that. Or I did like a Billie Eilish cover of the Barbie song for him when I fed him once. And again, he'd meow in the gaps. And watching those back is just like the most precious thing. And if I had had those on my phone, if I tried to store them on a hard drive somewhere in a computer, I would not even know where to find them. But to have this moving record of him, of his voice, and like his purring and jamming his tiny little head right into my neck to sleep there, because that's comfortable, has just been one of the things that I am astounded at how much that has helped me remember him, and also cope with the fact that he's not here. I contrast it with my mom having little to no social media presence at all, and feeling like she's not pinned in the world in some way. Almost everything I know of her is on physical paper, and I have to go looking for it. It's not portable like social media is. And so, yeah, I wonder if you can speak more on the intersection of social media, grief, pet loss, like kind of those three things together.
yeah. Well, I was thinking about this idea, especially videos. And one of the things I've learned now, and if I ever have another dog in my life, I'm just going to have to apologize in advance, because there's going to be a video probably every day, because I have a lot of photos of Captain and I have some videos of him, but really wishing I had more videos, because there's something about taking a memory from the one-dimensional, which is what a photo can feel like to me, to the three-dimensional of a video, to see how they move or hear how they sound, to hear yourself with them. Some of my favorite videos are of Captain and his dad, Finn. Because the way Finn loved Captain and the way Captain loved Finn was so precious. And it's a side of Finn that you don't get to see except with Captain. And I'm sure that's true for me too, but I'm me, right? So I'm with myself all the time. But to see the love that came out of Finn for Captain, and the very few videos I have of the two of them together are my favorite. And, thinking back to the beginning of our conversation, how pets get interwoven into every moment of our life, and they're part of so many of our significant memories, and they're either there in the background or the foreground, or they're just always part of it. And yeah, thinking about like everything the two of them shared, and to have those videos feels really precious. So just a little side note there. And I think that's part of too with the memorialization and social media of, am I sharing for me? Am I sharing for him? Am I sharing for us? That always gets a little tricky. And I know that can be a challenge for anyone in a family when someone dies, of like, who gets to share what and when and how, and to try to share from just your own perspective. But it's so hard, because when you have a pet together as a family, or another family member, like, there's a way that your relationship is unique just to you, but it's always connected to everybody else too. So I just thinking about that in terms of like, whose perspective am I sharing from too? Which has been interesting, because I shared so much from like Captain's perspective on his Facebook page. Like I would post for him, and then I would talk for him and create a personality for him. And then when he died, I was like, oh, wait, is that me? Is that him? Do I keep that going? Do I not? So it's been interesting to try to differentiate between what I post on his Instagram account moving forward after his death and what I post on mine. And I've tended on his page to post, like, we're getting ready to go camping for the first time this season. Here's a picture of Cap. He was always the best camper. Here we are paddleboarding. Here's a picture of him paddleboarding. And then on my page, I tend to post more for like, this is my first time doing this without Captain, and what's that meant for me. I lost the thread of your original question about memorialization and social media. Is that where we were going?
Yeah, that's we're exactly on the right track. And I think what stops a lot of people is fear of judgment, of family members or friends pointing at these posts as evidence that you're dwelling, or you're not okay, or you're not over it yet, or it was just a dog, it was just a cat. This everything that comes with pet loss, but then compounded by social media. And well, I don't know about anybody else, maybe it's because I work in grief, but I love seeing posts like this. I love seeing evidence that people are still connected to the pets and people that they lost, and they're not moving forward into the future without them. And a line that I often encourage grieving clients and students to say to friends and family who judge them for it, or to even post online, is, I'm scrapbooking this for me. This platform, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, this is a digital scrapbook, and I'm scrapbooking for me. And if you want to have an opinion on that, you're certainly welcome to, but it's not something I'm necessarily doing to produce any sort of emotion in you, or even produce any sort of response. I don't need the likes. I don't need the hearts. I don't need the cry emoji reaction that exists on Facebook. I post this because he's still in my brain. I post this because, like you said, I'm doing this thing for the first time without him, or it's his first death anniversary, or very fittingly, I think like 6 months after Gigi died, I had the most vivid visitation dream I have ever had from a person or a pet, where he was present with me on a beach, which is a place he's never been. He's never been to the beach. So I'm like, what are you doing here? But I made a post about it, and I was like, I want to put a thumbtack in this point in time. It's kind of like my mom. I wish you were pinned to the world in some way. And because we live a lot of our lives on social media, that helps. But I suppose the next question I could go into is like, do you have those voices in your head, despite being in the grief space of judgment of like, it was just a dog, people are going to think I'm doing it for attention, this shows I'm dwelling or not over it yet. And if you do, like, how do you respond to that, or muster up the courage to post anyway, if that's what you would call it?
I feel very lucky, and I don't know if it's because the people in my life know what I do and know better. But I haven't had anyone directly like communicate, say like, oh, it's been, how long has it been? Or you're still talking about him? So I haven't had anyone explicitly say that to me, thankfully. And also, I'm not immune to the fear that people might be thinking that, even if they aren't directly communicating it to me. So I'm not immune to all the messaging, I think, that comes with grief for everyone. And well, I'll just speak to the society, because I don't know about other societies, but this idea of, even if it's a human who has died, I'm like, oh, you're still posting, you're still doing this, you're still doing that. A long time ago, someone in one of my groups said their friends were like, are you still playing the dead mom card? It had been like a year since their mom had died. And I thought, yeah. So I feel very lucky. No one has directly communicated that to me. And our friends and family were so supportive after Captain died. I mean, people sent flowers and cards and dropped off food and acted as if it was a member of the family, because it was a member of the family who died. So I feel really grateful. And also, I find myself being like, am I posting too much about him? And I think my bigger fear is that people are going to look at me and my relationship with Captain before he died and after he died and think, that lady needs to have more going on in her life. Like, if the dog is the biggest thing, she's got a sad middle-aged life going on. So I'm not always sure if that's me judging me or me assuming other people are judging me. It's probably me judging me, but I do worry. I grew up in the era of like, oh, you're going to be a unmarried cat lady.
That's exactly where my brain just went, is the crazy cat lady trope. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And I do worry about that. because I think at Captain's end of life, in the last year of his life, he had a lot of needs. He had a lot of behavioral needs. He had a lot of medical needs. And I do think my world got pretty small and pretty focused on him. And it needed to. And I'm grateful that that was a privilege I had to care for him in that way. But it's been a little challenging, I think, to come back out of that piece because he was just such a focus and he needed so much. And I wanted to give him so much. Actually, I probably felt like I needed to give him more than he actually needed or wanted, but that's a different conversation. So I sometimes, those are some of the judgments that I worry about. But I was reflecting on what you said of like scrapbooking for yourself, and I absolutely love that. I think it's such a powerful way to reframe what the posting is. Because if you think about the libraries, right, they are filled with first person historical accounts, whether it was just someone's journal of when they were like farming about something and the Dust Bowl happened or whatever. Like those are some of our most prized historical documents. And I think same for me. Like I want to document what this grief is like. I want to document his life and I want to document what this grief is like so that in a year I can come back to it and look at where I was compared to where I am now. Maybe it's the same. Maybe there's a shift. But there's a lot of things I don't want to forget about the liminal space, I think, that happens right after someone or a pet dies. There's a liminal space that gets created. And I really wanted to capture that because it gets real ephemeral real fast and it dissipates. And then I'm left with just the endurance part of grief, right? The ongoing nature of it. That's just sort of this like day to day can feel a little grindy. And there's this, I don't know how else to describe it except that it's just like this liminal in between space after he died. And I really wanted to make sure I was capturing that. And oftentimes when I go to post, it's not something I'm thinking about. I just sit down and something just comes to me and it just comes out. And I do a lot of writing and it does not come out like that usually. It is not that easy. It's like gnashing to get every syllable onto the computer screen. And I go back to a long time ago. I heard it, I think it was Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk, or she did a talk about how she writes, the author of The Signature of All Things and Eat, Pray, Love. And she's like, I can feel it coming across the field and the farm, and I have to run inside and make sure I open up the door to capture it, or it just goes by me and lands with somebody else. And I feel that way sometimes with these posts about Cap. I'm like, I gotta just open the door and let it in because it's coming to me. I'm doing it, but it's coming to me. So it feels more like an honoring. But, I always joke about being an only child. So I do think I always have this fear of being perceived as like entitled, or what do they always say about only children? Not selfish.
I mean, I think entitled was a great word.
There's some word that people are like, don't let him be this way as an only child. I can't remember what the word is, but I was always terrified of that growing up. And so sometimes when I post, I worry like, are people going to be like, oh gosh, there goes that only child again, just turning the spotlight on her. But it's really turning the spotlight on Captain and who he was and who he continues to be in my life.
Yeah, I want to validate for other grieving people who are listening that might feel this way of like, oh, there goes that crazy cat person, crazy dog person, crazy reptile person, crazy horse girl, whatever the case may be, as the fear of people outside looking in and pointing fingers and saying that's not a rich life, or that's a sad life, or that's a small life that you're living. And if people are looking at you and assuming things like that, then they don't really know you or care to know you and your grief. You can also have a rich life while grieving something that a lot of other people perceive as insignificant. It just bums me out that people perceive of pet loss as insignificant or not worth stopping for. We say that, and okay, so I'm going to go down a rabbit hole and come back for a second. One of the first times you and I talked on a podcast, we were so angry that a lot of superhero tropes in movies were about orphaned children or children who had lost a parent. Another trope we have in our media, in society, is like tearjerker pet loss movies. And so we talk societally about one side of our mouth, it was just a dog, get over it. Stop dwelling in the past. Like, you don't need to have a whole funeral memorial, just bury him and get over with, or chuck him in the trash can. God, it breaks my heart. And then at the same time, you get like, I don't know the movie titles, but like Because of Winn-Dixie, where the red fern grows, A Dog's Life or A Dog's Eyes, or whatever the one that just came out in the last 5 years is. And I'm like, okay, so on some level, we acknowledge the preciousness and the meaning and the gravity of pets' presence in our lives. And then at the same time, we tell people to get over it. So, like, pick one. Which one is it? Like, I'm actually irrationally angry about that right now. I'm like, what the hell? What are we all doing here? We have horse movies and cat movies and dog movies, and I'm waiting for better reptile movies. I think there's, like, some reptile slander, especially towards, like, snakes and stuff in our society because of the Bible. But, like... But there's been parrot movies and there's so many other, there's the sense of like, yeah, pets are absolutely woven in. And then we tell people to get over it. So like, how are we doing both at the same time? Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I think we do the same thing for humans too. I mean, think about how many tearjerker holiday movies are out there of a parent who dies, and it's so profound in the movie and all of that. And then a year goes by and we say to people who've had a human in their life die, like, oh, it's about time. I'm a little worried about you. So yeah, I mean, it feels like it's the same thing in that way of, well, my other thought about that too, I tend to avoid a lot of movies that had pets die in them because it just couldn't. But I remember I watched Hachi, about the Akita that used to follow his owner to the subway station every morning and wait there for him until he came back. And then one time the owner died, I think, of a heart attack, and Hachi came to the subway station every day. And then now there's a statue of him. So that's one of the movies I made it through. And I feel like a lot of those movies don't show you the after very well.
Yeah.
So they lead you up to when maybe the dog or the person dies. And then there's like a montage, and then it's a year later. I feel like there's that's sort of the vibe a lot of times. Not all of them. Thankfully, there's so many more now that show the day after, the week, the month, the arduousness of the grief in reality. But a lot of them will like just cut away and come back. And a year later, everyone's kind of sad and they hang a Christmas ornament. And then there's a new whoever in the room. There's a new
I'm like,
puppy,
they're unboxing a puppy. Yep,
puppy,
it is exactly what they're doing.
And I was like, okay. And there, there's probably some element of that there's a good chance, not everybody, but there's a good chance that folks will have more than one pet in their life in a way that people don't have more than one mom in their life. So it makes sense to me that there's kind of this expectation of like, okay, you're going to have that kind of relationship with another animal. And just like with humans, like every relationship is so unique. And that if there were ever to be another dog in my life, or my life with Finn, or Finn's life, it's going to be a totally different dog. And there's a lot that comes with that. The grief of having a different dog, but also the possibility. Sorry, Shelby, this is my recent personal work. I'm like, Captain was amazing and perfect, and any other dog will be terrible, and I'll be terrible at parenting him, and it will be awful. It'll just be terrible. We'll regret it. We should never do it. And I was like, what if there could be another dog who's not as perfect as Captain, but has its own like wonderfulness? So I'm trying to like open up that a little bit. But I notice I'm pretty closed off to that piece. But for other people, I just wonder if there's you could have like 20 dogs in your lifetime. So got to keep your heart open to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just did a different podcast interview on somebody else's show talking about like a window of tolerance for different things. And I think a lot of people have a window of tolerance for like multiple animals in their life. Like some people are like, I am so excited to have another one because it's such a blessing to raise pets, and I never want to be in a house without a cat, for example. And so even if my heart is cracking open from this one, there's always room for another. Like that's a perspective I see a lot. And I'm kind of in your boat right now, where my wife, when she moved here from Canada, brought her cat. So we had 2 cats for a few months, and then my cat died, and now we're solo parenting 1 cat. Even just logistically, I'm like, I'm not ready for that. Just space-wise, the endurance of having 2 cats in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago was a lot. And so we kind of already have this protective grief measure outline of our hearts of like, we're not even thinking about it until we are in a different space. And that has offered me a bit of relief in that I don't have to even consider that as a possibility in the near future. But it's out there somewhere, like in the ephemera of like, I know there will be more. the cat we have right now will not be our last cat, and I know that for certain, but what comes next, I have no idea. And oh God, I had
It's
two
funny
questions
too.
for you.
There's so many people who, you know, they'll be like, I got another dog because I know the older dog is going to die and I need to make sure I have like a bridge dog. And we had started having those conversations probably about 5 or 6 years ago. We're like, should we get a puppy now? Because Captain's so
Mm-hmm.
amazing and he could teach the puppy. And we just kept not doing it. And we're like, okay. But then it just got too late. We're like, we can't. Cap needs too much right now. And we had a session with an animal communicator before Captain died. And we asked, or I think I might have asked, like, does Cap wish we had gotten a puppy or does he wish he had had another dog? And he was like, no. He was like, I don't like puppies. They don't make any sense to me. He was like, I am very happy I was an only dog. And even so, when Finn originally rescued him, Cap was there with his brother. And I think one of the questions, like, do you wish we had taken your brother? Captain said, I really hope he got a family as good as mine. As in, like, no, thank you.
Which is a nice way of saying,
yeah,
no.
I'm just going to be an only dog. So that helped us feel more secure in our decision.
Yeah. Can you quickly, this is another rabbit hole I didn't expect to go down, but can you talk about what an animal communicator is and how people might go looking for one if that's something that they're interested in? To my knowledge, this is something that's equivalent to like an intuitive or like a medium for humans, but for animals. Am I correct in that?
I believe so. I don't know that much about the world of animal communicator. I only know this one that I happened to find through a friend of ours who had connected with her to talk to a cat of theirs that was struggling at kind of with eating towards the end of her life. And this is a friend who is not into any of that stuff and was like, no, dude, this lady, she helped a lot. So we reached out to her, and my sense is just someone who's able to connect with the ways that animals communicate, which is not with words, but usually through images, I think. So she was able to just connect with Captain and kind of get his take on things. So I don't want to speak to like their work because I don't know exactly what they do, but there are many, many animal communicators out there, I know. And we found it to be really helpful. In fact, at one point, she was like tuning in to him to ask him about, I think, what he was eating. And he was sleeping during this whole session. He was just like crashed out, snoring away in the other room. And she's like, yeah, he's just letting me know he just wants more meat. However you can get it to him, he just wants more meat. And the moment she said more meat, he like popped up and looked at us. You know, we're always looking for things that are confirm our version of reality, but we were like, oh, that seems pretty classic of him to be like, what? Yes. What she said. I would like some more meat. Make that happen for me.
That's so fun. It reminds me very much of, I'm on a very griefy side of Threads, the Instagram sister app that's basically like nice Twitter. And somebody who is a horse owner or works at a barn said they had an animal communicator come in once just to relay the thoughts of the animals that were still present, like the horses that were still present. So no one had died yet. And one of the horses said, yeah, I like all the stable hands here and all the trainers here, but there's one I don't like because she keeps calling me a sandwich. And she's like, why do I just keep getting this picture in my mind of like a Subway sandwich or like a submarine sandwich? And this person who had written the thread said, yeah, the horse's name was Hogan and I kept calling him Fat Hoagie. And no one else knew that. Like, just no one else knew that. And it was the funniest thing. He was like, yeah, could you quit? Could she get her to quit calling me a sandwich? And it was the funniest. I was like crying, laughing, reading this. And I'll say, grief growers, if you know an animal communicator, please reach out and have them come on the show because I would love to know more about this. The only one I remember, there was a guy that did it on like night TV when I was a kid, and we'd watch him. Was it Caesar? Caesar Milano, animal communicator. I don't know. He was like a dog medium or something like that. But it was like a big TV thing to talk to animals in a way that we could understand, like to be a bridge of that gap of how they speak and what they want us to know. I want to pivot really quickly, Jana, and talk about, because both of you and I live in Grief World, And both of us got the blessing and the curse of knowing each of our respective pets was dying. And so I don't know about you, but I got about 24 hours notice. I don't know how long you had, but to sort of like plan, like, how do I want his death to go? Which is not something I got to do for my mom or for my best friend. And so Gigi was the first time in my life where I actually got to do what so many grief practitioners and death doulas advise us to do, is how do you create a quote unquote good death? How do you make it as tailored to their personality and their life as you possibly can in the time that you're given? And sometimes it's a few hours and sometimes it's weeks, if not years, especially in the case of like a terminal diagnosis. And I know for Gigi and myself, we watched his namesake movie. He's named after Gigi from Kiki's Delivery Service, an old Hayao Miyazaki film from the 80s. We spent the night on the couch together. My wife and her cat slept in the bedroom, and then we slept out on the couch and kind of had our last snuggle session together. He developed a lot of food allergies in life, and so he could only eat rabbit and then like a super hydrolyzed chicken at the end of his life, but he loved salmon and tuna and just was not allowed to have it, so he got to have as much salmon as he wanted the next day. He also got to have a lot of brushes and a lot of pets, and one of my favorite ways to greet him was like flipping him upside down and like yelling in his belly. And so we got to do, and my wife recorded on video, and I'm so glad I have it, a final yell in de belly, which is what we did the morning that he died. And I went for a walk before the vets. We had vets come to our house, which was lovely to not have to go to an office. But the garden that I grow in our community garden, I grew catnip that year. And so I made him a little wreath out of catnip with a red flower on it because his collar was always red. And after the vets came, I asked them after that was a series of 2 injections to euthanize him. After the first one, I said, can we just sit here for 1 minute, just 60 seconds? And I just want to feel him breathing on my lap and like say goodbye to him and just feel what it's like to be with him one more time alive before he is no longer. And I learned later that this is like a practice in medicine called the pause. And sometimes people will do it before a person dies, and sometimes they'll take 60 seconds after a person dies to just honor the fact that they were freaking here, that they lived. And after the time was up, they gave him the second injection and he was just gone. And I like to think it's because we took time to pause with him, but we asked for so much time with his body, like 2-3 hours before the people from the pet crematorium came. They're like, how much time do you want? And I was like, I didn't even realize I could ask for more time. Because that's something I didn't consider with my mom and I didn't get with my best friend. And so kind of stacked up like a row of really heavy but really significant and sentimental grief dominoes. They all fell in such a way that this terrible thing happened. And also it was one of the most meaningful, like 24-hour spans of my life. And it felt customized and tailored to him. So I wonder if, as grief professionals, if anyone is listening who knows that they have a pet with a terminal illness who's going to die soon, like if you could offer some ideas of maybe things you did to make his end of life, in grief speak, a good, air quotes, a good death.
Thanks for sharing all of that, Shelby. You took me right there to those last 24 hours with you and Gigi, and just having that element of choice and opportunity, which you didn't get with your mom and with your best friend, and how meaningful that can be. And, you know, it was tailored to him, but it was also tailored to you. And I think that's a big part of it, right? That we get to tailor it for ourselves as well. It's interesting. Cap had like a degenerative, there was no like name for the condition. He just slowly lost function by function by function over the last couple of months of his life. So we had a lot of time, but his caregiving requirements were so high, and his personality was so diminished by the time he died that I don't think there was a lot of intention behind like what would he want, because he was not really there. And that was really hard. So it was like, what can we do to keep him? He wasn't in pain. He just was not there neurologically, I would say. So So it's interesting. Like if he had still been him, the things I would have done at the end of life would have been really different. Like I would have tried to do all of his favorite things.
More meat.
More meat. Yeah, we did. He had meat the day the Grim Reaper vet came. We gave him his meat. And he did still enjoy eating right up until the very end. But it was really about just being with him and just being with his body. He laid with Finn for a lot of the day. He laid with me for a lot of the day. We went on many, many stroller walks because that was the thing he could do. But honestly, his last day was really about us and just being with his body for as long as we could. And yeah, looking back, just there was a lot of grief leading up to it because he was so different, and I see people who post about, he was himself right up until the very end, which is painful in its own way. It's so painful to have your pet still be completely embodied in themselves and have their personality, but his personality had changed so much that we'd said goodbye to him 1,000 times over. Yeah. But I was just trying to be physically close. I got up at 3 a.m. and went out to the kitchen where his bed was and just laid on the kitchen floor and held his paw for hours until I got up. But you're asking me what I would suggest other people to do. Let me pull out of my personal story and into my professional a little. And I think so much of it goes into the last moments, but it's backing it up a little bit to say how can we cultivate that sense of presence with our pet or our people prior to those last 24 hours, which so many people do. But that was a big thing for me, was the whole last 6 months. I was this is the last time I'm going to do this with him. This is the last time I'm going to do this with him. And trying to just be as present as I possibly could. I do think getting information ahead of time is really helpful. We tried to get as much information as we could ahead of time, but it was the first time either one of us had a pet where we were intentionally saying goodbye in that way. And everyone's like, oh, you want to do it at home? You want to do it at home. So we just did it at home. And it was fine to do it at home. But then I was like, oh, there's people who actually choose to go to the vet. And that's an okay thing. And I had just had this idea that was the bad thing for the pet. Never go to the vet. Always have the vet come to you if you can. And I was like, no, there's some people who don't want their pet to die in their home. And that's okay. So just gathering as much information so that you can make some of those choices. But I also think giving yourself a lot of grace for when it happens. And then you look back and you think, oh, I could have done this. I could have done that. That's always going to happen. Even when you have all the time in the world. We went to spread a little bit of his ashes at the beach on New Year's. He died on December 8th. And on New Year's, we went out to the coast because we would always spend New Year's at the coast with him. We were going to spread just a tiny bit of his ashes, 8 grains, maybe. And we, where are we going to go? And all these conversations and trying to make decisions. And then it happened. And I felt oh, I should have been that person who put out candles and drew a mandala in the sand and gathered up leaves and branches and made it look beautiful. But we didn't. And that was okay. But I felt that oh, I wish I had done more. So I think the practice for me has just been knowing that that's going to happen. No matter what, I'm going to feel like I wish I had done more so that I can just let that be the experience and not give myself such a hard time for that. Because I think in the moment you're doing what feels the best and right for you and for your pet. And in retrospect, it's one of the downsides maybe of social media and seeing people posting about what they do for their pets. It's oh, I could have got the blue one, or I could have done the green one.
Now I'm I could have turned him into a diamond. I had no idea. Yeah,
all those things. Idea. Yeah. And then just in the moment, trying to take a moment to just be present, to be does this feel like the next right step? And it doesn't have to be curated all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I want to grant permission for too, if people haven't considered doing this, is you can continue to have pseudo or semi funerals, memorials, rituals, remembrances months and years later. To me, I'm what's stopping you from going to the beach and drawing a mandala on another year? It won't be the same as if it had happened in the moment, and that I can validate for sure. And also, something we talk about often in Life After Loss Academy is my community is like, loss takes a lot of power away from you, but one of the things you do have the power to do is insist on your loved ones coming with you all the time. And kind of doing these redos or these add-ons to the house that was their memorial is another way that you can keep their presence with them. And there's some things you can't go back and undo. Like, obviously I can't get my cat's ashes back and turn him into a diamond. That was a silly example I was sharing, but there are some things that aren't undoable or redoable, like you're not able to do them again, but other things, especially where it's like, now I have more energy, or now I have people with me, or now I have no one with me, like no one's watching how I'm going to do this, so I get to do it by myself, or now it's been X number of years, or now I'm in this location that they would have never seen, or that they would have loved, or that we always went to together for the first time without them. Like, there's so many like tiny doorways of opportunity to not just maybe redo something, but to continue memorializing too. And I will say, I know that Jana and I are talking about the blessing and the curse of knowing in advance if a pet is going to die. And also, kind of like you can have social media exist for fun with the dark knowledge that it will also be a grief scrapbook one day. You can also think about at any time, like, if worse comes to worst, so many of my childhood cats ran out into the street and we never saw them again. You can also think about how, if that becomes my reality, how will I memorialize them then? Because you do still have some choice, some agency, some power within that to make that devastating experience something that still belongs to you and your pet and any other members of your family. And kind of, again, as an adult looking back, I wish I had known that. I think we lost 4 cats to traffic. We lived on a very busy street as a kid, and they were like, outside, I have to go outside. And we were like, okay, you can go outside. For years, they would go outside. And then one day just was their last day outside, and we would never know when that was. And I grew up in a family that you lose a cat and you immediately go out and get a new one. And the old cats are not even buried in the backyard. I won't tell you what happened to them, but they weren't buried in the backyard. And not having ceremonies or memorials of that, I was like, I wish I could go back and like do that with my childhood self. She would have liked that. The most I got to do was draw pictures of them and hang them on the fridge. But yeah, there are still ways I continue to carry them with me. So even if sudden death is something that has happened to a pet that you've loved, or even to a person that you've loved, or something that you fear happening in the future, you can even consider then, how will I memorialize them and show myself, potentially show others or include others that they were a part of the family and that they mattered and that they changed me with their love or their presence.
And I think there's something about grief that inspires, encourages, kicks us in the butt to get to know ourselves more than we ever did before, because when you were like, well, you can still go to the coast and do a mandala. And I was like, yeah, but I think what I realized is like, I'm not a mandala person. Like, that's just not me. Like, I might be like, oh, wow, I wish I was that person, but I'm not that person. And I think there's ways of realizing like, oh, I feel like I should do this, but going below that to be like, what is real and true for me and for my pet and my family, the other people involved in my pet's life, and getting to a place of feeling completely entitled to do grief the way that works for you. And it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. And you might be someone who wants to go back and create a memorial or do a mandala in the sand for your childhood cats who have died, or you might be someone who's going to do something totally different or not anything at all. And I think that is both the opportunity and the fear and grief is that there's so many different things you can do. And so you feel a little lost about what should I do? And then you try something on and that doesn't feel quite right. And you try something else on and that feels sort of like the right thing. But then there's always that, like, am I doing it right or wrong? And when folks can be, sit in a group together and be like, wow, that sounds like an amazing memorial that you did for your dad. And it's totally not what my family and I wanted to do. And have both of those two things be equally valid and okay. Then it's like, whew, job well done, group in getting to that recognition. So that's just what I sit with it. There's a process of getting to know myself in this grief. That's a way of carrying Captain's memory forward or keeping him with me or transforming that relationship. But it's really about knowing who I am.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And am I a mandala person? Am I a turn him into a diamond person? Am I a make a flower crown out of catnip person? That's the person I ended up being. And a lot of it will feel thrown together or haphazard, even if you've thought about it in advance, because nothing's going to feel good in the moment. I have had to many times release the expectation that any of this is going to feel meaningful in the moment. I think what it feels is as good as it can or as meaningful as it can, and the richness comes for me in looking back, because nothing has felt necessarily in the moment glorious or transcendent or happy. Sometimes the best I get is connecting, and I think that's more the target that I aim for in thinking about what constitutes, again, air quotes, a good death. Because you're talking about groups, Jana, I do want to pivot for our last question to the work that you do with the Dougy Center, where you are, and not just Grief Out Loud, which is another fantastic podcast that people listening to this show should go listen to right now. And you can go back and start with my episodes on the show. I think I've been there twice. I'll be there soon in the future to talk about my third book, but also the Dougy Center and the work you do for grieving kids and families, and how or if that ties into pet loss at all too.
Yeah, so I work at Dougy Center, National Grief Center for Children and Families. We're located in Portland, Oregon for our physical services, and we are a peer grief support group program for children, teens, young adults, and their adult family members, both before and after a death. We work with kids anywhere from the ages of 3 up to 18, and then young adults 18 to 40. And our entire program are peer grief support groups. So it's an opportunity for kids, teens, young adults to be with other people their own age who have experienced a death or have someone in their life with an advanced serious illness. And our hope is to decrease isolation, to increase connection and community, and to help folks know that they're not alone in what they're going through in their grief. So in my role there, I facilitate some groups for kids and teens and young adults. And then I also do the podcast, Grief Out Loud. I do a lot of trainings for folks, a lot of written resources and materials that are available on our website. And one of those that I would point out to folks is we did a collaborative resource with Dove Lewis, who is a local animal hospital here in Portland, and they have a pet loss support program. It's one of the first in the country as well. So I collaborated with their pet loss grief support coordinator, and we have a resource tip sheet for families supporting kids and teens when a pet or companion animal dies. And Deborah, who's the person I worked with, shares some really amazing, helpful language and ideas for talking with kids about end of life for a pet, and then also ways to memorialize and to have that conversation about whether or not we're going to bring another animal into our family. So it's a really, really helpful resource for families who have kids and teens.
I love that, because I think oftentimes, from my personal experience and even clients I've talked to, is like a pet was one of the first things I ever lost. That was my first introduction to death as a possibility for anything or anyone in my life. And oftentimes how families respond to the death of an animal will show you how they'll respond to the death of a family member or another person in the future. And there's kind of all these stories that get interwoven with that, and cliches or practices or cultural things that get woven in. It's like, this is often how you teach your family what it is to grieve. And so to grieve well, again, heavy air quotes around well as you can around a pet loss, can often help kids and families feel more settled or more guided into what it is when a person dies. And that's not to say that animals' only role in life is to instruct us how to grieve people. They're so much more than that. And also simply because of their tragically short lifespans in comparison to ours a lot of the time as humans. Statistically, just a lot of them go before our relatives or friends do. And so they're kind of these, in their deaths, opportunities to figure out what it means to honor someone we care about a whole freaking lot. Jana, thank you so much for coming on Grief Grower today. I am so grateful to talk to you about Captain and hear even more about him. I'm going to think of him every time I eat meat now. because that just tickled me so much. And my sweet Gigi, who was just a monger for anything salmon related, he's in good company. So that made me very happy. Yeah, thank you so much for telling us about pet loss, telling us about Dougy, and talking about the role of social media and grief. I think all of these things are so important to cover because they are part of the world in which we live.
Well, Shelby, thank you for inviting me on, for wanting to know more about Captain, for creating a platform to talk about pet loss, and for just holding such gracious space for me in this time together. So yeah, very appreciative of that.
That's all for this episode of Grief Grower. Thank you so very much for joining me today. If you're looking for grief support beyond this show, you can find free workshops, blog articles, and my signature What's Your Grief Support Style quiz at shelbyforsythia.com/links. And if you'd like to get support from me for your unique loss experience, I hope you'll join us in Life After Loss Academy, my online course and community. I'll walk you through my 5-step grief model for rebuilding after loss, and you can get live coaching from me every single week to answer your questions. Replays are always available if you can't attend live. It's just $33 a month to join, or $22 a month if you're a marginalized or financially stressed griever, and you can cancel your membership at any time. Now through August 31st, so there's just a little bit of time left to join us, you can try 1 month of Life After Loss Academy absolutely free with the code GRIEFGROWER, and you can find a link to do that in the show notes. And be sure to share Grief Grower with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Grief Grower is hosted by me, Shelby Forsythia, with music by Addie Goldstein. Until next time, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world, and I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.